Actually, really appropriate follow-up from Corin's talk. So I'm going to hand over very shortly for our show and tell to Andy Dent. Andy is the founder and CEO of Touchgram, which is a new experience, touch-related experience for iMessage. So, Andy, over to you.
Okay. Funnily enough, and I'll get this question out of the way, we have nothing to do with haptics, and there's a couple of reasons for that. One is that Touchgram was designed, despite the name, to be about touch on very low-end devices that often don't have haptics. And I also started this years ago before the Taptic engines came along, so there was the possibility of doing things with vibration, but also it's a patent minefield due to the era of all of these fancy pages that use different haptic patterns and haptic recognition stuff in combination with messaging. So I have a patent on Touchgram, which is granted in the US, Singapore, it's coming through in Australia. And I was just double checking earlier, I've steered completely away from any mention of haptics in there. But I don't know, is anybody here old enough to remember HyperCard on the Mac? That's one of the early Mac Classic things. That was before the web. That was a user tool that let you do things where end users could create experiences that reacted to how you touch the screen. And I'm just going to click on share some windows just to sort of show you a little bit of what Touchgram's about. So there's not a lot of iMessage app extensions around. A lot more people have encountered stickers than have counted app extensions. But within iMessage, when you launch it and you go in to message somebody, you have this bar along the bottom of the screen, which lets you choose different things, and there's some of Apple's standard ones. And if you've installed Touchgram, which is on the App Store right now, although somewhat out of date, you can launch Touchgram from there. And that comes up. And iMessage app extensions operate in two distinct modes. You have what they call the compact view, and you expand up and you get about 90% of the screen in the expanded view. This bit at the top here where you can see the Touchgram title and a kill box is part of the iMessage interface, so you can't do anything about that. Below that, though, you're basically running a native app. So you can do anything you like within that space. And the typical mode that most of them operate in is when they launch into the compact mode, and the compact mode is used for sort of menu type things. And again, you can't, because the Chrome that iMessage provides, it includes the tap bar which is also a drag bar to expand. At any moment, the user can change what you're doing from between those two modes. And so whilst you're running native code, it's very much a callback environment. What you're doing here is completely within iMessage's world. You don't know anything about what's happening. You don't know the context. They give you grids where you can tell enough about the context so you could restore the context of a given message, but you can't tell who the person is, who they're sending messages to. You can't read other messages. So there's a lot of privacy issues there. So I'll just show off. So the basic Touchgram interface, this is a new install on here, so I haven't got anything listed, but I've got a whole bunch of samples built in already. And Touchgram is basically a thing that lets you create experiences. It uses Apple's Sprite Kit under the hood. It's got different touch recognition on top. And you could think of it as somewhere between a game authoring engine and PowerPoint inside your phone. So I built in all these things here, not necessarily exposing as many of them to the end user at the moment. But for example, this was a very early tale of a woman who asked if she could send a picture of her foot home to her daughter. And when the little girl tickled her foot, she'd hear mum's laughter. I don't know if you can hear the laugh track there or not. So you can see when it starts playing, you're in as near to a full screen experience as I can do within iMessage. There's a little bar that vanishes off to the side that is the play bar. It's got a send and it's got an add to favorites. So when you've received a message coming in, you could add it into favorites. And what I'm building is an increasing number of features of Sprite Kit. If you're not familiar with Sprite Kit, it's a 2D gaming engine. Most of the 2D games on the Mac and on iOS use Sprite Kit or a related earlier engine, Cocos 2D. It's got shaders, which let you build shaders that you can use for the full background or for dynamic content. So I'll give you an example here of shaders being used as little nodes. So you can have a shader that does this. Shaders are, if anybody's ever programmed them, you know what I mean, they're horrible mathematical things where you're basically, these are only what they call fragment shaders. So you're basically doing math to govern the color of a single pixel. And so designing them to get the visual effect here, it's one of those things where the code seems to bear absolutely no relationship whatsoever with the visual effect on it, but they are ridiculously compact because the user, what's running is a tiny bit of code. There's not necessarily any visual assets. You can use a shader, as I did, as a background, and you can also use a shader as a photo filter. Let me just show you the, I've got filters on here. Where am I? I'll put it into the coming soon one. I'll show that off. So that's a bunch of things coming in. So that's a background shader, as I showed earlier, and you can use shaders to provide filtering here for pictures. So that's, in this case, I'm just taking whatever picture the user has selected. But they, yeah, you've got this like bytes of code or a couple of K of code can produce an incredibly rich effect. So if you want to bundle a lot of stuff into a game or into a message like this, shaders are absolutely the most compact way it can be done, as opposed to bundling a background image or a full-blown video. And I mean, this carries all the way through to web stuff. WebGL is now about as common as JavaScript support, and it's a technique worth looking at. And as a result of the growth of WebGL, there's sites like ShaderToy, where you can see an amazing range of shaders available, most of which are syntax roughly compatible with the shader engine used in Sprite Kit. So I wasn't keeping an eye on time because I wasn't sure what time I started. So I can waffle on and show all sorts of things as long as people like. So feel free to yell at me or put stuff in chat to tell me to stop showing stuff off. So let's just go back to the menu, and I'll show off a little bit of, this is my woeful editing interface at the moment. And this is showing off the one I just demoed. So one of the things I took as, I call it the HTML lesson, is there's a view source command in there. And anytime somebody sends you a message in Touchgram, you can go in and look at how they created that message. So you can see here, that was that's the shader one. If I'll go back, that's interesting. I just killed it. So let's go pick a simpler example. This is frozen on me. Let me stop sharing and try sharing a different one. Thankfully, I have a range of simulators running. All right, so we also have dark mode. I had to do dark mode, unlike an app where you can choose to not support dark mode. If you're running an iMessage plugin, you have no way to escape that. All right, so this is one of my favorites. This is something that I'm kind of pushing out shortly, is the idea of touchable memes, where it's just a simple 2-page scene. And if we do a view source on this, we can see this is a slightly simpler one. So you can see I've got this kind of page paradigm there. You've got a background picture, which is picture from the photo roll or some other source, color. A forthcoming version is going to allow people to pick a shader as a background there. A simple text editor, just the basics there, picking edge colors, and the touch sensor. And the touch sensor screen is one that needs an awful lot of usability love. This is something I've wrestled with a lot, is the range of touches I've provided. The initial tickle your foot scenario turned into a bit of a nightmare. I thought that could be done with a generalized touch recognizer. It turned into, in the end, I just gave up and said that tickling is a special gesture we recognize, because tickling I'm just detecting as basically a kind of rough zigzag or back and forth motion at any given angle, kind of anywhere or anywhere inside a given area. So I could define, and that's a bug. That's a cute one. That's supposed to come up with a preview of the background. So if I went in there, and I've just killed it. Sorry, apologies for running a demo version. Has anybody got any questions for me whilst I relaunch that?
I do, actually.
Yeah.
The one you're just showing is one that we've kind of spoken about before, and I think about like the big picture and the end game, and I'm fascinated by the idea of using Touchgram or something similar as like a choose your own adventure.
Yep.
Or choose your own adventure messaging, where you can send something and different friends might get different results or stuff like that. What do you see as kind of like the big play for this?
That's a little bit of a Dorothy Dixer in the sense that Andrew knows I've talked about a greeting card store, but I really don't know. One of the problems with an anonymous product like this is I have zero knowledge who's using it. I can get tiny bits of feedback from the App Store in terms of installs and how long people are on there. And I've worked out a neat way to get some utterly anonymous feature usage feedback using some of the cloud data that goes through as people send messages. I'm just going to append a few counters. So I know that messages are being sent by people using sounds a lot, or people that are using touches a lot, but that's about it. The granularity of that's just ridiculous. So a lot of artists I've spoken to like the idea of being able to put their art into a greeting card store and create a more interactive greeting card. If you look at the templates that Canva and so forth have, they don't lend themselves well to an interactive experience. I'd be quite happy if they bought me. Their greeting cards end up being delivered as basically videos or static JPEGs. There's no interaction at all. And one of the reasons I've got a patent on this stuff is because it is really unique. This combination of interaction and the patent is specifically on the interaction being described inside the message. So it's a little bit like if somebody was crafting a Flash experience, or they're editing their own web pages, that kind of thing, but it's within messages. So this is an onboarding video that I've built in that just teaches people the different kind of swipes that you can and touches that you can do to show how, if you trace things accurately, it's doing the things. And I'm just going to do some walkthroughs of that. And if you just touch it, doesn't work. I've just realized I've got to put some feedback in to tell people that they're doing the wrong thing. But that's going to be an onboarding video that comes up. But different people I talk to, a lot of people just like the idea of doing something fun. Like they can see this as being a really stupid next thing to play with, like doing your own filters on Snapchat. This lets you take that to the next level. There's a whole romantic / sexting thing. You can send pictures and have feedback depending where you touch the screen. I mean, obviously people can do things like that. There's a very weird thing happens whenever I'm describing this to groups of guys. If there's about 3 to 5 guys and I start talking about the tickling the foot, particularly if I'm doing it with kind of like hand gestures, somebody will start smirking about halfway through the explanation, and they just totally go down the rabbit hole on that one. But single people by themselves don't often have that reaction. I don't know what it is, some weird male thing.
Yeah, I've got to say, I've never been guilty of that one in all the time that we've known each other. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna give myself leave. All right, thanks very much for that, Andy. That was brilliant. A great little insight. Obviously, there's a lot more that we can talk about. We'd love to get you back for a full talk sometime in the future, going through maybe one particular aspect of what you've found in the development. But yeah, that was really good, and
Okay.
we appreciate that.